guess this is my episode to introduce. So I am falling asleep at the wheel. So episode 15, thank you for joining us. Calling our episodes here, Willing Warriors. This particular one is on living debt-free. So scripture is really clear, right? You've probably heard this verse bantered around. The debtor is a slave to the lender. Coupled with that, Christ has come and died to set us free. And so we're not called to be any man's slave. Yet our modern generation ignores this principle completely. We ignore this. In fact, not only do we ignore it, we disobey it. We ignore this and we readily take on debt for all kinds of things. So for college, for a car, for a house, for vacation, for whatever we want, whenever we want it. And usually we can't afford it. Otherwise, why would we take on debt? So think about, just frame it this way. We're looking to be blessed. We're looking to bless ourselves as we're disobedient. And you know what? Doesn't work very well. So in this episode, we want to kind of paint a picture, if we could, about testimony to how God has been gracious to us, not because of anything in and of ourselves. This is God, who He is, and we've learned to wait upon God, and there's just some really wonderful things we can look back now after almost 38 years of marriage, of how God has blessed us as we waited upon Him and taken the credit card and said, no, we're not going to go that route. So maybe you want to kind of frame it up early in our marriage, what our financial situation looked like.
We didn't really have any finances to speak of, but we were married the summer right before Kevin entered into a senior year of college. So we were living in college apartments for marrieds, and we had an old car for which we were very thankful for, but we were the proverbial poor college students, and we really didn't have any fights about money because we didn't have any, I think.
But our glorious dining out episode.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Well, anyway, we'll do that another time.
All right.
But so college is finished. Kevin graduated, and we moved to Texas when he took his first job as a chemical engineer in a petrochemical company facility down in Texas. And at that time, starting in as an engineer, when he got those first few paychecks, this is more money than we've ever seen, even individually or as a married couple for sure. But it always seems after we got groceries and gas, and I don't think we were spending huge amounts of money, but all of a sudden at the end of the month, it's like, why isn't there any more money in the account than this? And so every now and then we would have a little squabble. Well, I didn't spend it. I'm just buying groceries. So we decided it would be wise to start a budget. Well, if we don't know where it's going, we have to develop a system. And actually, we didn't have to develop it. There are plenty of financial counselors and others at the time. There wasn't Dave Ramsey, but there was Larry Burkett and Ron Blue, and yeah. But they had a system to show how one could monitor one's finances and keep track of it. So we started saving every single receipt, and we would itemize everything almost to the nth degree to see where the money was going.
So if it's outlined that way, you say, oh, this is so much work. This is a killer. Well, let me outline this, right? So it says, men, rule your household well. So if you don't bring order to something, there's chaos. And the chaos is the devil's playground. And where the devil takes over, there's ugliness, there's sin, there's wickedness that brews. So take it over and bring order to it. And where you bring order to something, just like in the first acts or first days of creation, right? There comes righteousness and beauty. So men, bring order, bring financial order. Remember that the provisions that God has given you, we often say it's money, right? But those provisions are not yours. You're just a steward. You're a steward of those things, and He's called you to to use those resources well, those talents, as Scripture talks about. So set your priorities. And that's what all a budget is. It's about setting your priorities, right? So the first 10% that comes in, write the tithe. Trust God, right? Give him that part and make this statement of faith and know that he's working. Then what was next, right? Well, we had to eat and we needed shelter. We needed clothing. We needed electricity. We needed a transportation. I know for some of you it's going to be surprising. We didn't have a cell phone. In fact, they didn't exist, right? No. If there was any money left over in our budget or any money left over after that, then what did it go to? Well, books were high on our list. Hospitality, starting to save for the children's education, college, or what it might be, sometimes even before they were born. Hopefully there was money left over for eating out. Sometimes vacation money. So I was joking with my wife a little earlier. Our first eating out episodes while we were in college were called Simple Simon's Pizza. $5 for a large pizza. And we got water, no Cokes. And it was, I think with a tip, $5 or $6, $7. That was once or twice a month. That would be our big eating out expense. So that was all we could afford. But our goal, remember where we started, our goal was to get out of debt. And here we had to learn to reel in our senses, our desires, our passions, and to pray, Lord, we really would like this. Please provide. And we can attest that he did provide, but it wasn't always the next day or the next minute. So our needs definitely provided immediately. Our wants, sometimes we thought were needs, but they were really wants, and he would provide, but in a different time as we waited upon him. So one of the things that helped us along early on was what I call the envelope system. So you want to describe maybe the envelope system and some other things we did to tighten our budget. I know Dave Ramsey talks about beans and rice, but I think you have some other strategies too.
So yeah, we once we developed a budget system, or we sat together and decided, well, how much do we need? How much are we currently spending for groceries? How much do we need? And obviously that changes because our life situation doesn't always stay the same. So we had added more children in number, and obviously some of those expenses started to grow. But he mentioned the envelope system. So some of you may already have an idea, and this isn't necessarily, you're like, that wouldn't work for me. I know a lot of people use Excel and spreadsheets, and there's so many apps on your phone that can keep track of how you spend your money. And so, but he mentioned we did the envelope system because at the time there were computers, but there weren't personal computers and there weren't cell phones, so therefore no cell phone apps. But anyway, I literally took a business envelope and wrote for the ones that, so we have a couple of bank accounts. They're joint accounts, but some of the monies goes into the one that Kevin primarily uses, and other monies go into the account that I primarily use. And so we determined, okay, well, Kevin sits down every weekend and pays out some of the household bills, the utilities and such, monies for the gas for the car. Sometimes I think you had the medical expenses, anything like doctor's visits, that kind of stuff. So my envelopes were entitled clothing, food and toiletries, eating out, gifts, activities. And then we would set a certain amount that was agreeable. And I would cash a check once a week, every other week, whatever, and put said monies into those envelopes. The nice thing about that, when the envelope's empty, it's time to stop spending, basically, and you have to wait till the next time. So I know when we first introduced as young married couple, friends of ours they already had a budget set up, which was really wise. We hadn't gotten there yet, but hearing them talk about it, I know the wife was talking about she had like a $5, I think it was a week, to do anything she wanted with. It was just personal money. She could save it for something or use it, for a little splurge, go get a coffee or something. And I just remember thinking, oh my, but it really does help because we can spend money. And I I do most of the shopping, and I'm much more of an impulse buyer than Kevin is. So that's good to help balance that. And then also, like he mentioned, if you don't, you mentioned beans and rice. I mean, if you go out and buy meat or even a dozen eggs these days, but you're going to spend a lot of money, and prices have gone up so much. I see that every week, and it's just like, but if I make a homemade food item, it's much more likely to be less expensive than buying, and it's generally healthier for one also than buying prepackaged or pre-made foods. And I always tried to do once a week grocery shop. So that meant you have to develop a menu planning and know what you need to buy, so you don't have those last minutes and, every now and then you forget something, and that's going to happen. But if you can get most of all of your stuff, because then again, you're working in a budget. And I don't know about you, but when I go to the grocery store, if I only have 2 or 3 items, sometimes I'll still come out with 6, 7, 8, 9, thinking, oh, we should use this and we could have that. So you're just going to try. It's just a matter of you're just going to usually spend more money. We also had, as Kevin mentioned, limited eating out, maybe once or twice a month. And then also we had, and generally it wasn't just like, oh, let's go do this. It was more purposeful. Oh, let's, it made it a little bit of an occasion, a celebration.
Even if it was simple Simon's pizza.
Yeah, or McDonald's hamburger. But also, you can save a lot of money if you thrift shop, if you're willing to purchase gently used items that you like, especially for growing children. But for myself, I just take it home and wash it good and able to use it. And furniture, that's how our first house, even today's house, still has a lot of used furniture. And if we didn't have the cash, we just generally did without. God is gracious, and we were blessed a lot of times. I know sometimes furniture, sometimes a new washer and dryer were gifts given to us, and other things that were a huge blessing.
So some people might know us today, but they didn't necessarily know us 30 some years ago, and they'll look at us. So it's important to know where we've come from, and we know so many starting couples are like this, right? To be patient, wait. So when we first married, we did not have a washer and a dryer. So we struggled and we saved money. We went to the laundromat. We struggled and we saved and bought ourselves, remember, it was a Maytag washer. So we had a washer,
A good washer,
but we didn't have a dryer. So what do? Well, we'd wash our clothes and hang them in the backyard on a clothesline. And then if it was inclement weather and we couldn't do that, well, we'd haul them to the laundromat. We saved some more and we bought a dryer. The old car that we had in college, it was on its last legs, so we ended up buying a used car. We took out a 3-year loan on this used car. Paid it off in 18 months because over our head was, debtor is a slave to the lender. We didn't want to be a slave to the lender. We rented for a number of years in our married life. We were scraping together money for a down payment. We were trying to wait. We were trying to be patient. And so this was hard. But this is where God works, and he builds character, teaches us to control the desires of our flesh. Maybe you can talk a little bit about my grandmother recounting her first mortgage and what it was like for them.
Yeah, she shared with us that their first mortgage was for 7 years. And she just shook her head and said, 7 years seemed like a lifetime. We just didn't want to have that hanging over our heads. And now, sadly and unfortunately, it is expensive. That is a major, something to acquire. And now it's often 15 to 30 year mortgage, which is a very long time. So we had to reset our expectations. And our first house, at the time we purchased it, we had 2 children. It was 4 bedrooms, had 1.5 baths, and the family we bought it from raised 6 children there. which reminded us a little bit of our first vacation down in the Smoky Mountains. There's a beautiful, you drive up into the park, there's a location called Cades Cove, which is sort of a plateau once you get up into the mountain. And several families back in the early 1800s, mid 1800s, had settled up there. And they've, you have these literally one room log cabins. And you read on the sign, this is such and such family. They had 10 children. They had 12 children. And you're like, where did they put them all? So we thought, well, 4 bedrooms, we can probably make do with this, at least for quite a while. And we did. So I think part of it, Kevin alluded to it, is that, we see something and we want it, and we want it now, and we're not willing to wait. And then sometimes our desires change. You're like, oh, that really wasn't that important. I know there were a few things that we had looked at over the years thinking, oh, this would be fun to have, or, but we decided to wait, forego that. And after a while, it was like, yeah, we didn't really need that. But I mean, if that's something your heart really desires, but we would encourage you, if possible, to wait and be able to pay for it up front, because generally you end up paying much less if you're willing to save and pay cash for it. So, God tells us to wait, to be patient, wait upon Him. And often, after we learn to wait, God so faithfully has provided.
So as we waited, He blessed, and sometimes those blessings would come from parents, family, friends, used items, things they were discarding that we said that would work well. Maybe a really interesting story. So our first house, we were waiting. We'd lived in rental houses, rental apartments for a while. And we said, okay, we had 2 kids. Now we had enough for a down payment. So we found this house, we were scouring and searching. We found this house my wife described. And the family said, we want to buy it. And they said, okay, they'll sell it to us. But they said, with the house, you have to buy this extra lot right next door. And we said, we don't want the extra lot. We just want the house. Nope. Got to buy. That was the only way they were going to part with the house, is to sell the house and the extra lot together. Went back, we prayed. We said, okay, we'll buy the extra lot. So we bought the extra lot with no plans to build on it. So after the deal was closed, we turned around and sold the extra lot. I think it was like 3, 4, 5 months later, and for triple what we bought it for. So here was the Lord blessing us on things that, the best real estate deal I'd ever made. It wasn't what I wanted to make, but he tripled our value on that lot. We then took that money and got ourselves on a cash system for vehicles. So we had our first car was, we paid, had a 1.5 year loan on it. And then from there on out, we had to buy a van because our family kept growing and growing and growing. And we grew out of our little 4-door sedan. So we took that money from that extra lot and waited patiently. We bought a used van. In fact, all the vehicles we bought, here we're now married almost 38 years. And so I'm not going to tell you it's not a sin to buy a new vehicle. I'm just saying there's so many people that don't need to be buying a new vehicle. Oh, I love the smell of that fresh car, the leather, the tight suspension, everything's working well, peace of mind. But most people can't afford it. And how do I know it? Because they're taking 5- and 6-year loans on it. And the day they drive that brand new car off the lot, depreciates 5, 10, 15, 20%. So our approach was to buy used vehicles, 5 years old, drive them for another 10 years, maybe even 15 years. And so, we had to put up with some nuisances, and we still are, right? But we've just developed this habit, and it carried us through, and we've learned to live with it. As we bought these used cars like this, we have become very good friends with the mechanic. So I know it's nuisance, but one trip to the mechanic is almost synonymous with 1 month car payment. And we weren't at the mechanic on a monthly basis. So maybe a quick other story. My wife talked about used furniture and going to the retail shop. So here she was, like this Proverbs 31 woman, going high and far to find things. So I remember it was, I think 25 years into our marriage, coming up on our wedding anniversary. And I said, we are going to buy a new bedroom suite. And no, she just said, didn't need it. She didn't need it. I said, no, we're going to do it. We had the money. So I think the first the only new piece of furniture that we bought, I think retail before that, was a rocking chair when our first child was coming. And the second piece was probably 25 years later, was this bedroom suite for our 25th wedding anniversary. All before that, between those two time periods, it was always used furniture. But it serves us well, and God has been gracious. So maybe you could talk a little bit about some large purchases, and you want to add something else.
Yeah, well, just on that furniture front, having a lot of children, our furniture and homeschooling, we were home a lot. And I didn't want to be a mom who had to put plastic over something new because I would be so upset if something got spilled or ripped or torn. And we still wanted to be our children, to teach them responsibility, good stewardship. Something that made an impact, this is a little bunny trail, years ago was we had attended a homeschooling seminar, Greg Harris, and he mentioned, children, when they're 18 months old, 2 years old, don't know the difference between a magazine that is old or you really don't care about and a book that you really do care about. So don't let them just get in there and start tearing pages, because you just teach them that, no, we don't tear the paper, because it's teaching them a respect, something that, they're not innately born with. So anyway, back to the topic. Large purchases. So large purchases, it was something that Kevin and I usually sat down and we talked about, a new vehicle, just when there was something, like you said, later down the road when we were talking about investment property or something, we saved the money for it. We tried to not take any quick decisions. So if we went shopping for furniture or a used vehicle or something, we didn't, we just pretty much had decided that we wouldn't buy anything that day. So like I mentioned before, I tend to be an impulsive buyer, especially for smaller things. But we just said we need to go, well, thank you for the information on that, to the salesperson. And, may we take your card, and we'd like to go home and think about it and pray about it. So, if it was something like a vehicle, we had saved for months, sometimes years, just putting monies away for it. We could wait another day or two. We didn't need to have it right then. Although I do hear large vans are selling like hotcakes right now. I don't know if it's because they're hard to come by, but if you don't almost act on it, they're hard to get. But that's it's still wise to wait. But a budget set, and you can agree upon priorities, okay? And sometimes they have to change. Sometimes other things will come up that you might say, oh, this really is more important than that. So, but when you do have those priorities and you have monies set aside, you could take that vacation or buy that new dress or suit or something that might be a little bit more expensive, but you had prepared for that and you could do your research on it. So yeah, over the years, I don't think we've had really any more fights about money, discussions and just agreeing on priorities. And again, a budget is like a textbook. It's to serve as a tool, a guide, a help, but we're not to be masters to it either. It's just to help one. It's a tool, just to use along the way.
So when we talk about living debt-free and setting priorities, you hear these statistics, but so many divorces, the match that lights the fires somehow always comes back to money. So what it's really about is they're not aligned. God puts husband and wife together as one. And you have to be one in your mindset about how your priorities on spending money are. So setting a budget drives that, and it should be, focused with prayer. And so here we are telling about, we were blessed by people before Dave Ramsey, as my wife mentioned, Ron Blue, Larry Burkett, and some friends of ours too that pointed us this way. So here we are, can testify back now of how God has blessed us, right? No credit card debt, one car loan. We were able to pay off our home mortgage early. And after we got it paid off, what were we able to do? Well, then about the time we got it paid off, we had children going off to college so we could provide them an inheritance. as they were coming into adulthood, right, of going off to college. So they didn't have to take debt. We were able to help them get into their first car so that they didn't have to take on debt that way. So as we were becoming debt free, and we learned after 20, 25 years that to be satisfied, not with things, but with each other and what God provided. So there was more income coming in than what was going out. So there was an excess. So what did we do? We tried to be wise stewards. We turned around and we decided to invest this. We got into some rental property. It was also interesting because as we bought some rental houses that we've now turned in most of them into Airbnbs, it was a chance for our children to serve, to help us with painting and repairs and cleanup and what have you, basic carpentry, wiring, electrical. And so now we run these 5 Airbnbs and we have this extra income in, and we're able to bless others. So it wasn't so that we could live extravagant lifestyles. There's no joy. We've gotten over that early on. But now we can bless others, and then we can take other life decisions to do other things and not beholding to one company or anything else like that. So God has greatly blessed us as we look back after 38 years, not to covet the neighbor's new car. My wife teased about some of the things that we wanted. So one of the things I wanted earlier on was a boat or some ski-doos. And if you have one, I don't want to impart guilt. But after we decided, let's wait, the desire wasn't as strong anymore. And the income definitely wasn't there. So we never got one. But there are some other things that we've been blessed and paid cash for. And we hope we can share the joy in that with others. But it starts with that discipline of following God's word and living debt-free, waiting upon him and paying cash. And that comes with great blessings. So maybe you want to close us out?
Oh, we are blessed. And God has been faithful to his word. He has provided through others and just hopefully through hard work and diligence and obedience. But he has always provided in very surprising ways, sometimes, And as Abraham's descendants, we have enjoyed the opportunity to bless others. So until next time, thank you for joining us.